With Paranormal M, you won't just hear ghost stories, you'll feel them. Each episode pulls you deeper into a world where the strange is very real. Subscribe and ring the bell before the next spirit reaches out. A strange phone call we still can't explain. It was the mid of July 2011. I was a 15-year-old teenager, completely clean from any alcohol, drugs, or anything like that. I was very athletic and I loved sports. I would even describe myself as a pretty responsible and grounded kid for my age. That summer, like every year, I was spending my vacation at my grandparents' village. It was a small place of around 400 people. There were always kids to play with, and we would stay out together from afternoon until sometimes 2 or 3 a.m. My grandparents gave me freedom I never had with my parents. In their backyard there were 2 houses, one built by some great-grandparent well over 100 years old. The other, newer, was built by my grandfather. That summer, for the second year in a row, I decided to live by myself in the old house. My grandparents stayed in the other one. During the day, I helped my grandfather with farm work. We had a small farm. It was a lot of hard work, though. In the evenings, I went out with friends and came back whenever I wanted. It felt like absolute freedom. At that time, I had a girlfriend from my school back in the capital city. It was my first love and full of innocent excitement. We talked on the phone daily. One night, a big summer storm was approaching. The village lost power. There's no lights, no street lamps. It was complete darkness. It started pouring and thundering so hard that there was no way anybody could go outside. It was around 11 p.m. That's when I decided to go to bed. Outside, the storm was so fierce that the thunder made my bed shake. It was really windy the whole evening. Surprisingly, I fell asleep pretty quickly. The next thing I remember was waking up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was a Nokia 6303. When I opened my eyes, what I noticed first was that the storm had completely passed. Clear sky, calm air, streetlights are back on. I looked at my phone and it showed my girlfriend's name. I answered the call, put the phone to my ear while laying down. Closed my eyes and we started talking. We were greeting each other and asking what the other was doing. I remember feeling extremely sleepy, and very shortly after answering, maybe 10-20 seconds after that, I must have fallen asleep. I don't remember anything else. The next morning I woke up normally. I was sitting on the toilet and I remembered, oh yeah, she called me last night. Curious about what we talked about, I checked my call history. Received a call around 12:26 a.m. Lasted exactly 1 minute and 35 seconds, and I thought, that's pretty odd. Immediately called her to ask what we had talked about after these first 20 seconds or so of the conversation, because I couldn't remember anything. At first she laughed, thinking I was joking. What do you mean, you don't remember? And what 1 minute and a half are you talking about? She asked. I explained that according to my call log, our conversation lasted about maybe 1.5 minutes. Then she got quiet for a moment and she said, That's all? That's all you remember? And she asked again. She said that after she first called me, we talked for about a minute or so, during which I told her that my phone battery was dying, and that I'd call her back using my cousin's phone, since we were supposedly together at the time. She agreed and we intentionally ended the call. About 20 seconds later, she received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, it was me again, or it sounded exactly like me. Are you guys ready now? She said we talked for 45 minutes straight. I apparently told her it was my cousin's phone and that we could save the number and talk about personal things that only she and I knew. Apparently I acted completely normal, using familiar names and references. Nothing felt off to her, and she said that there is no way she could mistake my voice. No random stranger could possibly know that much about us. Near the end of the 45 minutes, she says my mood suddenly changed, and I ended the call abruptly. Right after, she received a text from the same unknown number and said, "I love you, little mouse. Everything's fine. We'll talk tomorrow." We had specific nicknames for each other. Never in my life called her Little Mouse before. She found it strange, but also kind of sweet, and brushed it off. She told me all of this. For a second, I was sitting there, mouth wide open, and I laughed, and I didn't believe it. I was alone at the house that night. There was a storm and no electricity, and I'd gone to sleep early. My cousin wasn't even at the village. I couldn't believe her at first. I thought she was messing with me. But when I returned to the city a week later, we met up and she showed me her call history. First out call was about 1 minute 35 seconds. Second call was from the unknown number, about 45 minutes. Then, a minute later, the same text message from the unknown number. We decided to call the strange number from her phone, but I'll speak. The man answered almost immediately. Complete stranger, sounded mid-30s to us, and told us he was living in the capital with his family. He's very much cooperative when we explained the situation briefly, and he said he had no idea who we were, and he had never called or texted my girlfriend's number. When he checked his outgoing messages, no record of the text that we received. My girlfriend swore she didn't recognize his voice at all. We didn't want to keep him too long, so he said thanks and ended the call. Afterward, we sat in a park bench, completely freaked out, speechless for minutes. Neither of us could explain what happened. Years later, we went our separate ways, each now with families and children. But even now, 14 years later, we sometimes still talk about that night. How we felt in the storm that took place, and the most bizarre was that she was talking with me for almost an hour. We never found a satisfying explanation. We speculated maybe it was some kind of cell network glitch, some weird signal crossover, but even then, how did the stranger, whenever it was speaking, have all the personal details to carry a 45-minute conversation? And how did a text message get sent from someone else's number without him even knowing? Nothing like this ever happened to us again. Brainwave healing anecdote. Around 6 years ago, I was having a date with a very nice guy. I was visiting my city for a conference on alternative medicine. It was a nice chat. We're having a couple of beers in my favorite bar. I was quite comfortable. I don't remember at which point the conversation shifted to this alternative medicine congress. I guess talking about our occupations, maybe. He told me about how his life was a mess, with addictions and depression, lack of drive, motivation in life, until he discovered this certain world about alternative therapies. I think it was in this moment that he kindly asked me to show me something. He just asked me to hold my hand. I had no idea what he was trying to do. I didn't mind, and I thought he just wanted to get some physical contact with me. The moment he touched me, a current went through my whole body. It was a nice feeling, subtle but definitely there. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before. This was a couple of seconds, and I think he told me to close my eyes. He asked me if I felt better and less anxious and nervous. Not that I was feeling too nervous, but I did feel some type of relief. He went on to explain to me how he was a professional in the field of brainwave therapy. How our brain emits and receives different kinds of waves, and just used one of them to make me feel this zap in a healing way. I'm surprised. I couldn't explain what it was, but the date continued. He asked for a second date, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to meet again. Got to confirm that this congress was happening, and I even think I found his social media after it. I also confirmed the stuff about the brainwaves 100% real. Not the part about how you can manipulate them to heal, and definitely not how you can make someone feel that electricity. Anybody know anything about this? To this day, it all remains a fun but unexplainable anecdote. I'm not even sure if it classifies as paranormal. Yes, that stuff is real. The Ghost of My Grandparents' House. I personally never experienced much of any of this story, and much of the stuff I'm about to tell you is purely from my grandparents. My grandparents moved into their house around the late 70s and maybe early 80s. It's a fairly large, suburban-style beige and brown house located in a small community. Situated about 1 kilometer or 0.6 miles away from the main part of town. Over the years, they renovated the house, raised 3 children there. My dad, my uncle, not the same uncle as my last story, and my aunt. Anyway, let's get on with the story. In 2006, my grandpa's mom, who was my great-grandmother, passed away, and I'll refer to her as Mimir, since that's what I called her. I believe she was in her late 90s when she passed. So she lived a long, happy life, and I slightly remember going to her house when I was about 2 or 3 years old, and from what I can remember, she was a very nice lady. After she passed, my grandma, we're going to call her Mary, and my grandpa, we'll call him George. They were in their dining room talking with a few of the relatives. All of a sudden, everybody started hearing the plates in the kitchen cupboards moving around. Now, when Mimir was still alive, she would hide money in between her plates, for what I assume would be for her guests to find there and keep. But anyway, as George heard this, he went to the kitchen, and as soon as he was halfway to the cupboard, the plates stopped moving. He thought nothing of it, went back to his seat. Right as he sat down again, the plates started moving again. The same thing kept happening daily for about a year, and then it stopped. Fast forward to about a year or so later. Mary found a vintage butter dish in a garage sale, and she brought it home and put it in the cupboard that's next to their stove on the other side of the kitchen from the plate cupboard. After she put it in the cupboard, she went on with her daily activities. She was cleaning the house, and she noticed that the cupboard door had opened. She just thought maybe she forgot to close it, so she went up to it and did just that. Nothing happened until the next morning. George and Mary awoke in the morning, went to their kitchen to get a cup of coffee like they usually do. The way their house is set up, they have a small hallway off their kitchen. Off that hallway, there's a bedroom, main bathroom, and a laundry room. So they walked into the kitchen only to realize that the cupboard door was open again. Mary was sure that she had closed it the night before, yet it was open again. Keep in mind, both George and Mary are the only ones who live in their home, unless, of course, guests are staying over. Usually my sister and I or my dad are on when they're in town. At this time, there were no guests staying at their house, and both George and Mary swear that they didn't open the cupboard, and it keeps happening daily, sometimes even multiple times a day. And even still to this day. Another time, maybe 2006. Or 16, rather. I was probably around 13, staying at my grandparents' house, just like I do every other weekend. I was in the kitchen on my iPad browsing the internet, doing what every other 13-year-old does online, when I decided to take a selfie. I opened the camera app and was about to take it, but before I did, I weirdly decided to call out to Mimir to see if she wanted to come take a picture with me. After I called out, I took the picture. I looked at the picture, and to my surprise, I see a red orb beside my head. I was shaken. I obviously didn't think I would see anything, but to my surprise, it was right there. There's no sources of red light in the kitchen at all, so it had to be something paranormal. I kept the picture on my iPad, but since then I have unfortunately somehow lost it. Also, whenever I stay at my grandparents' on the weekends, I usually stay in the biggest of the 3 bedrooms upstairs. I feel creeped out to be up there alone, especially when the lights are off or it's quiet. The bedroom I stay in is very cold compared to the rest of the house, even when the heat is on. I always feel like I'm being watched from that area. Or maybe something's behind me when I'm upstairs, and the feeling turns into fear as I walk down the stairs. I always feel like something's going to push me down. Sometimes that feeling follows me downstairs when the house is empty, or when I go downstairs during the night to grab something to eat. The only time I don't get this feeling downstairs is when the lights are on and my grandparents are down there. I also sometimes feel like I'm being touched by something upstairs, and I'm up there as well, which obviously makes me feel uncomfortable when I turn around to find nothing there. Another area of the house that my grandparents call the sunroom feels very unsettling to me as well, and I get the same feeling in that room as I do upstairs. And as I'm writing this story, I was alone in that bedroom of my grandparents' house, and as I wrote, I felt like a cold hand touched my forearm. I heard several knocks and taps from the dresser on the other side of the room. Kinda terrifying. Update. August 9, 2020. Last night, my grandma was in her bedroom, which is in a little corridor just around the corner from their kitchen. She usually likes watching TV before going to bed. And adding a bit of context, in my grandparents' kitchen, they have a little desk area where they have 2 computers, a TV, and my grandpa's police scanner. He likes hearing about the action in town. Anyway, as my grandma was watching TV, my grandpa was in his workshop in the basement working away in one of his crazy projects. All of a sudden, the light in the kitchen came on by itself, along with the TV and my grandpa's police scanner. Now, obviously, the lights are connected to a switch that need to be pressed to turn on, same with the TV. Police scanner has a knob that needs to be physically turned to turn it on as well, and keep in mind, my grandma and grandpa were the only people in the house, and as I mentioned, all this happened when my grandpa was in the basement, so it wasn't him. But also, it wasn't my grandma because she was in bed, and leaves us with the question, who or what did that? My uncle's true ghost story. Back in the late 1990s, my uncle, let's call him Kurt, moved into a house about an hour away from where I live now. I wasn't born yet when this happened, so I'm retelling the story as if it were passed down to me by Kurt and other family members. At the time, Kurt had just moved in with his girlfriend Melissa, and his young son Joseph was from a previous marriage. Joseph was around 3 or 4 years old when the strange things began. One day, while playing quietly in his bedroom, he started having conversations with somebody who wasn't there. Curious, Kurt asked, "Who are you talking to?" Joseph replied with the man. At first, they brushed it off as nothing more than childhood imaginations. But Joseph continued speaking to the man regularly. He even began sharing his toys with him, placing them carefully on the floor as if offering them to somebody unseen. Strangely, the man seemed especially interested in toy airplanes and G.I. Joe figures. Soon after, Kurt and Melissa began experiencing disturbing events nearly every night. They would usually fall asleep watching TV in their bedroom, making sure to turn off both the TV and the lights before bed, but often Kurt would wake up for no reason in the middle of the night and find both the old TV and the light turned back on. Now, this wasn't a remote-controlled TV. It's one of those old boxy models with physical buttons he had to press. The light was connected to a push-button dimmer switch. Not the kind you could accidentally bump or switch on remotely. No logical explanation. On more than one occasion, the TV turned on, the screen full of static. Then it flickered briefly to an image of a blurry airplane, hovering on screen for just long enough to send chills down their spines before cutting back to static. Even creepier were the footsteps. Almost every night they'd hear slow, deliberate pacing just outside their bedroom. The house layout made this even stranger. Their bedroom was on one end of the hallway and the kitchen was on the other. And in the kitchen, they had a coffee maker with a small red power light that stayed on when plugged in. And on certain nights, they noticed that the red glow would dim and brighten, as if somebody was passing in front of it, momentarily blocking the light. But when they checked, the hallway and kitchen were always empty. One night, Melissa was awoken suddenly. She had felt a cold breath against the back of her neck. That's when she turned and the room was empty, but the cold sensation lingered. Kurt once tried recording audio late at night in hopes of capturing something. When he played it back, he heard a faint whisper say, "Stay safe." He had been alone when it was recorded. Growing increasingly uneasy, they finally brought a priest in to bless the house with holy water. After the blessing, things calmed down for a while. Years later, in the late 2000s, Kurt and Melissa bought a new house, this time about 4 hours away. By 2011, they had a daughter named Lizzie. Joseph was no longer living at home at that point. He'd been going through personal struggles. When Lizzie was around 1 or 2 years old, she began doing something eerily familiar. She would stare into the empty corners of the room and smile, sometimes giggling, sometimes waving. Especially seemed to focus on framed photos of Kurt's late father, her grandfather, who passed away in the early 1990s. Long before she was born, too. One day she looked at his picture and said, "Hi, Grandpa," before skipping away. Eventually she stopped doing this as she got older, and things remained quiet until around mid-2019. Kurt was using the basement bathroom when he suddenly felt a strange presence. As he looked at the mirror that hung in the back of the bathroom door, he saw a shadowy figure standing there looking at him, its form barely visible in the reflection. It stood motionless for a few seconds, then vanished. Though startled, Kurt didn't feel threatened. He told me he felt like somebody was watching, and not with malice, but with familiarity. The odd time when I go visit them, I usually stay the night in the guest room, which is also the basement. Whenever I'm in the basement, I get the feeling that I'm being watched, and it doesn't matter which room I go into, I always have that feeling. A few months ago, while organizing boxes in the basement, Kurt opened a long sealed closet and found something chilling. His father's old pilot uniform was neatly hanging inside. No one had touched it in years. No one even remembered putting it in there. Kurt once told me his dad had been a pilot, and while we're not sure if he served in World War II, it's very possible. Kurt was born in the 60s, and timeline fits. The strange part is the spirit, if that's what it is, has never harmed anyone. Hasn't tried to scare or chase people, only to appear, to be seen, and maybe to watch over the family. That's why I believe it might be his father, a quiet guardian keeping watch from beyond. Part 2, my own experience. In the summer of 2019, just a few months after I first posted about my family's strange experiences, I ended up moving in with my Aunt Melissa and Uncle Kurt for a while. I was dealing with some personal issues and wanted a fresh start in a quieter town. They generously offered me a place to stay, and I gratefully accepted, hoping the change would help me get back on my feet. Their daughter, Lizzie, who is now 8 years old, had grown into a bright, energetic kid. Got along well, and she often invited me to hang out and play Xbox with her in the basement rec room. Cozy space, but beneath that warmth lingered a subtle tension, an echo of the unease I'd felt in past visits. Since there is no extra rooms upstairs, the guest bedroom in the basement became mine. It was the same room I'd stayed in before during my visits, the same one that always left me feeling unsettled. That sensation of being watched, of not being alone, returned immediately. But compared to the other part of the basement, that bedroom almost felt safe. Tucked away just off the rec room was a small, low-ceilinged space, barely 4 feet high, a firewood room, they called it. The house was still heated by a wood stove, and I'd often fetch logs for Kurt when needed, but I hated going in there. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like something was watching me, always from the same dark corner at the back of the room. It was a more focused kind of dread, heavier, more deliberate than anything I felt elsewhere in the house. The door to the firewood room had a large window built into it. It kind of struck me as an odd choice, and sometimes late at night when I'd get up to use the bathroom, I'd glance toward that window and feel my stomach drop. I'd see movement inside. Once or twice, I even saw it look like a pair of faintly glowing eyes peering back at me from the darkness. I'd blink and they'd be gone. Other times it was just a flicker, like someone darting past just out of view. Sometimes I'd also hear noises coming from that room, like shuffling and faint taps, even my name being whispered. I never told Melissa or Kurt what I was experiencing. Didn't want to sound ungrateful or stir up any old fears they might have put behind them. Something about that room was wrong. Guest room might have made me uncomfortable, but the firewood room made me afraid. Whatever was in there, I don't think it ever wanted to leave. Unexplainable encounter that I've thought about for 20 years. And for the record, I've never really told anyone the story. I come from the kind of family that would laugh in my face if I ever tried to explain what happened, so I kept it to myself for a long time. And I should also add that I'm not super literate, so please excuse my grammar. I was 9 or 10 years old watching a movie with my dad and younger sister before bed. We did this almost every Friday night. Every night around the same time, Dad would send us to bed. We'd put on our pajamas, hop into bed, and wait for him to come up and say goodnight. He'd come upstairs, turn off our lights, tuck us in. Sometimes it'd take 2 minutes, sometimes I'd fall asleep with the light on before he even came upstairs. I got into bed facing the wall and threw the covers up over my head like little kids do. Everything covered but my face. As I was lying there looking at the wall, a human-shaped shadow slowly walked into the room. From my perspective, it was a clear outline of a human. It was about from the belt line up. I distinctly saw the outline of an ear, and the silhouette moved with similar subtle shifting and bobbing that people have when they walk. It stood over me, not completely still, for 15-20 seconds. Walked out of the room just as it came in. I wasn't horrified as much as I was confused, and after it left, I waited a few minutes before I got up to go get my dad. He was downstairs in his chair, finishing a bag of chips. I tried to ask him if he was in my room because I saw something. It was so preposterous to him that he brushed me off and told me to go back upstairs. For Dad to walk up 3 flights of stairs into my room completely silently in an old house, walk down the same way, wouldn't have been impossible. Wide awake the whole time, too. Been thinking about that night for 20 years, and to this day, I don't know what happened. Maybe you guys have experienced something similar, can provide some insight. Some of my experiences. Without any opinions of my own, only the facts, you can decide for yourself what happened. Odessa, Texas. I noticed 2 stars that were odd. Odd because as time was passing, they were in the same position in the sky. The sun was slowly setting, so if there were stars, it would also move position, since the Earth rotates. Unless you're a flat Earth person, then I don't know what happens then. So I took a look with binoculars and then a telescope. I looked at an actual star to compare, and an actual star just looked like a shiny dot. These other 2 quote-unquote stars had 3 dots each. They were in the form of a triangle, not shiny, just 3 dots of light. Because of their distance without a telescope, you'd only see 1 dot of light. Didn't move at all, and both UFOs just faded away slowly. Between 1 to 7 days after the 3 dots event, around 3:30 a.m., something was hovering over our house. I was asleep. My brother knocked on my door, waking me up to tell me something was above the house. My brother saw this light that lit the whole backyard. He also felt air pressure and bass. My mother woke up from feeling and seeing the same thing. She had work that day, so she's up around 3:30 a.m. anyway. Then something happened for sure. She also caught part of a big round shadow cast upon the backyard fence. It's as if the moon is out and something big is hovering over the house, the UFO will cast a shadow. Then it started to move. That's when the light, bass, and air pressure shut off. After they both told me what happened, maybe 10-20 minutes later, I went back to sleep. Which, to be honest, I think is a bit out of character to do so. I'm already nocturnal as it is. I Just got told by my family a UFO was above the house. I go back to sleep a few minutes later, I guess. No airplanes, no helicopters. Nothing was scheduled to fly above that airspace at that time, and we even called to confirm. When I woke back up again in the morning, I had what looked like 3 needle shots in the form of a triangle on my right hand. It was on the middle finger and the knuckle, like small round scabs, perfectly clean, no mess. Went away about a week later, but about 5 or 6 years after that, whenever hot water would touch that area of my hand, it would sting for about a second. Years later, that feeling went away, and it wasn't gradual, it just one day went away. Now, I would also want to say this. I've had experiences that would not be UFO experiences, although maybe alien-related as well, no idea. Quick rundown. This was in Houston. One time I heard a very clear voice only on the right side of my ear. It was the word, "hey." It's kind of like a gradual and growing louder kind of whisper. If I could text how it sounded, it would be like, "hey." I say growing louder, but it really wasn't loud in the sense that it startled me. At first, I thought maybe it was the TV because that was just weird, but the TV was off. Nothing else could make that sound, only on my right ear anyway. Another example is when I went tubing with my brother in New Braunfels, Texas. While we were tubing, my mother and grandfather, they were back at the hotel. My grandfather received a picture. It was in the color of sepia, and it's what looked like me around rapid water, some kind of submerged square platform. On my knees, I was looking up at the quote-unquote camera. It was an aerial shot, maybe a few yards up, but how my grandfather received the picture was different. It covered his whole phone screen, which means it was not a text message or an airdrop. Once he saw it, a few minutes later, my mother wanted to see it. The picture was nowhere to be found. I thought it was interesting that the whole picture was also in color and sepia. I've had other experiences, such as, well, things would appear to be, some may say paranormal, but maybe it could be alien-related, who knows. And of course, as quite a few do, I wrote a quick book about it, using an artist to depict most of what happened, which I won't mention its name here. What it is, why these things happened, no idea. But they did happen, and I thought I'd share it here. So this is the full story. It all started with the school being right next to an old graveyard, because in our culture, you can't be disrespectful to graves of the dead, or they'll haunt you and your family as revenge. We, the kids, would walk on it, not realizing we were disrespecting the spirits who were supposed to rest. It started abruptly. My younger cousin saw something in his father's room at around 3 to 5. A man, as she put it. Then once at night near the school in the dark, it was in the winter, she was crying because, quote-unquote, people were crying and screaming at her. It was horrifying for her, especially because, well, her older siblings and I couldn't hear it. We had to usher her to her house, and then when her father, my uncle, left us alone once in her mother's house to get the old TV from my grandparents' house, we heard chains and heavy breathing that stopped just as my uncle appeared walking by the window. Then there was the push my father felt when he was doing laundry while he was home alone. Then younger me saying something about the man in the closet in my sister's room. It stopped for a while until about a year after those incidents. It's when me and my cousin were playing in front of the church and started crying. That's because we heard somebody crying despite being alone. My parents, siblings, and I moved due to the hauntings. But after 2 years, we came back to my hometown, and nothing really happened except for a few doors slamming and sleep paralysis happening. But everything changed when we moved once again to my current city. My mom got woken up by a woman's voice calling for Lisa, which is not my mom's name. She couldn't see anyone, My younger brother started being religious all of a sudden because he kept getting scared for some reason. Then my sister and my father heard someone, a woman, saying hi from the laundry room. But no one was there, and my sister started getting horrible sleep paralysis of a demonic woman drooling on her face. It would end in her suddenly sitting up with somebody's drool on her forehead. Till the night my sister finally saw it. It was standing in the hallway when my sister was going to go to the bathroom and kind of get in front of it, not moving, just staring. Just a completely black figure despite the light. She was standing there for a good 20, maybe 30 seconds before rushing to her room and started escalating. Started seeing it in the corner of my eyes a lot, in my room, in the same hallway, in the kitchen, on the stairs. Just around 30 minutes to about an hour ago, I heard it humming and moving around in my closet for about 5 seconds, stopping every few notes. But the weird thing is, at first it was a man, now a woman. Even my baby cousin, who's 3, started seeing it, and mentioning the man in my uncle's room at my grandparents' house. Not even wanting to go in there. I'm scared, genuinely. It grinned at me. I spent most of my childhood going back and forth between my grandparents and my great-grandparents' houses. They lived right next to each other, with just a gravel driveway separating the two houses. So it wasn't a long journey between the two, and one section of my grandparents' basement was dedicated to my grandpa's model trains. This section was about the size of a large master bedroom. The trains took up the entire area. There were tunnels and towns and factories and train stations. It was like a wonderland for a 7-year-old kid. One day I walked over to my grandparents' house. I found out that my grandpa and my uncle were in the basement running the trains. I quickly ran down to the basement steps and headed for the doorway to the hall that led to the area that held the trains. About halfway to that door, I suddenly stopped dead in my tracks. Can't remember clearly what made me stop, but I think it was a sound, and I turned to look, and there was a shadow on the wall that looked like a face. Clearly had eyes and a mouth, but no other features that I can remember. I stood there trying to figure out what was making the shadow on the wall. It must have been cold outside because my grandma would hang up clothes in the basement on the metal rafter. Ran along the entire length of the basement. I told myself that the clothes hanging there must be somehow making the shadow look like a face, and I was about to continue on my way, and that's when the edges of the mouth turned upward into a grin. It wasn't a nice grin, like, "Hi, welcome to the basement, young man." It was a menacing, evil grin, like, "No one's gonna hear you scream when I start eating your face, young man." And if you've never seen something like this, I can't really explain the feeling that runs through your body. It was like every hair on my whole body stood on end at the same time. I've heard people say a chill ran down my spine, but that doesn't accurately explain this feeling. And people that have seen something like this know what I'm talking about. Kind of like an electric shock running through your entire body. I was terrified, and I was only 7. I did the only thing I knew what to do in this situation. I just lost it. Started screaming, crying, and just stayed there with this thing grinning at me. My grandpa and my uncle came running in, and my grandma came running down the stairs, and I turned to look at my grandpa, and when I looked back, it was gone. They tried to tell me my mind was playing tricks on me, and maybe I was just imagining it. But I know what I saw. There were no shadows on that wall after it disappeared, so nothing there for my mind or my eyes to misinterpret or confuse. I'll never forget it as long as I live, and to this day when I think about it, it gives me goosebumps. Steps in the house, but none there. This happened about 12 years ago. My parents and my little brother had to move and found a very nice house. They lived there for about 2 years until they finally bought their own house. My older brothers and I had moved out before that, but I used to spend about every other weekend there. I really liked that house. Always thought it had a good vibe to it. And somehow I brought this up at a family gathering. I've always liked that house when, surprisingly, my brother and parents told me that they didn't. They've been hearing footsteps and walking in the house, especially at night when they were alone, like my mom alone or my brother alone. I mean, I heard wood like creaking. It is an older wooden house, but they said no, that wasn't it. They, being especially my mom and brother, said it felt like somebody was there and even sometimes watching them. That was a bit of shocking news for me. My family is very Christian and down to earth. Never have we spoken about ghosts or anything, and also not into ghost stories or movies. My mom for sure ain't. So I was acting surprised, and they asked me if I ever heard or felt anything. In a way, like they wanted me to say yes, and I think I didn't, but somehow I kind of remember once thinking somebody was walking around outside my room. Of course, no one was there. I'm not sure if this really happened or not, or if I just imagined this years later because of kind of how they surprised me with this topic. If it really happened, it didn't occur to me that it could have been anything other than the wood sounds of an old house. My mom also said that evening that the owners had a chair, and I know this chair. They said to please leave in a certain place. It was the owner's granddad's chair. It was a weird chair, like a toilet chair that has a round lid and kind of metal bin drawer underneath. Pretty sure it was for you-know-what business. Anyways, felt that this chair was weird, but just because, why not just go to the toilet? Why would you want such a chair and use it for toiletry business? My mom said she put it in the attic or the cellar somewhere, and I'm not sure if they also said that it got better with the ghostly actions. Ghostly actions. I might bring this topic up again next gathering because it really interested me. Mostly because I would never have thought that they would believe in ghosts in the first place, or that they felt so safe because they have Jesus in their hearts and all. Safe. I also found it weird that my mom kind of blamed it on the chair, and anyways, I felt it was kind of a bright and friendly house. Maybe I'm just numb to stuff like this. My father's friend told that my house is haunted. I've had multiple people tell me that there's some sort of ghost in my house. 2 being my father's friends, and 1 that sort of was my own on a separate occasion. I haven't really thought too much into it, but weird shit has been happening with me, so I figured I'd talk about it. They've all said it's some sort of dude. I don't know the history of my house so well, but it is old and it has many occupants, including an older lady that died in said house. But everybody has specifically said some sort of male. For the weird things happening, it's been over the past couple of months. I've noticed things of mine disappearing, stuff that I know I haven't misplaced and I've dug through my whole house looking for. I've lost a shirt, I've lost shorts, and some underwear. Some little knickknacks I keep somehow, and they move. I know I didn't place them there. And I'm always very clean, so that's why this is so strange to me. I've also had previous nightmares start coming back, which was a thing that happened with a previous experience. It just didn't sit right with me. I've been waking up with random bruises on my arms and legs. I'm perfectly healthy. And this is kind of new. It's not just a couple. I'd say right now I have about 10. New ones show up with ones that eventually fade. I've also had things break out of nowhere. For instance, one night I went to go get a snack. My fan was on, but barely, and randomly one of the blades just flew off. Scared the shit out of me. Luckily, it did throw in my direction. That sounds unlucky. I've also noticed random what looks like scratches on my walls, and I know there's been more, but I can't think of any as I write this. I tried to brush it off as maybe my dog, but it doesn't explain barely any of this. And I don't sleep with her in my bed, and so that can't explain the bruises. I don't move in my sleep, and these aren't just small bruises. I'm kind of panicky with stuff, so I thought maybe somebody had broken in, but for one, that's not logical for over months, and two, my dog barks at everything, and I'm a light sleeper. I would have woken up if someone was in my house. The only final thing I can think of is in my attic, maybe. The side of the ladder randomly broke sometime. I don't know when, as I only really went up there once, but it's never really fully closed. The people who have said my house is haunted say they feel watched, especially in the bathroom, which is creepy as shit, pun intended, and one specific person says she can feel that presence everywhere. Not physically, but she knows that sort of type of thing. This is also strange to me, and I was curious, I guess, and I'm a bit of a collector of old dolls, which my friend previously said they were haunted as well, but I've had them for so long that this has been happening over the past months. Ghosts shopping. I used to work at a failing company. It's almost gone now. I'd get driven around to multiple locations between southern Washington and Beaverton, Oregon by management. That's because they needed 2 people to open a store. I was a chump willing to do it. I'd done quite a few shifts at what they called the Hawthorne store in Portland. It was an old building sitting in an area that almost looked like it was a suburban place. Lots of houses along the main drag. Customers had told me that this old building was once a sort of cornerstone of the community, a grocery store. One could imagine many people in the community frequenting, even walking for their weekly needs and such. It was early in the morning when we set out for the day. I was tired, but I loved working with that particular manager. We unlocked, rolled up the heavy graffitied garage door over the entrance before I fully woke up for the day. We got our tills set, and I got ready for another day in paradise. We had some tasks to do before the store opened, but eventually it was time to open the doors and let the customers in. Nobody was waiting at the time, though, and this was sort of a boring time with the doors open and being on register duty. I'd do anything just to get a customer through that door and break the monotony. Lo and behold, the automatic doors did open. Nobody there, though. Must have been a fluke. Common occurrence. I guess I'll just sort of faff about here in the front end while waiting for the real customers. The store wasn't really large, but it was sort of long in an optical illusion kind of way. You wouldn't realize how long it was until halfway down the aisle. Wait, what? There's a man down there near the end of the aisle in the supplement section. Must have come in when the door opened and I hadn't noticed. He was holding a product as if he were reading the directions, standing in the supplement section, and the product was in his left hand, a blue bag with long handles in his right. He had a darker complexion, average height, and he was there, and sure as shit he was there, and he was shopping. I grew self-conscious as I looked at him. I sort of PTSD from working retail in bad stores. People didn't respond well to being watched, so I stepped away and I did something else. Moments went by. I hadn't forgotten about the man because I anticipated him coming to the checkout. Only he never did. My favorite manager eventually came up to the front to give me my first break of the day, and since she was on register duty, I told her about the man. She gave me such a peculiar look as if she knew something I didn't. Instead of taking an actual full break, I decided to clear the whole store looking for him. Sales floor, and even the back room and the break room. Nothing and nobody. No other customers had even come in yet. Portland shoppers be hunting for supplements even in death. Probably. Fully black eyes. Like, this sounds fake, but it's fucking weird. There's this woman, Paula, we'll call her. She's maybe 4'10", 85 pounds, originally from a country in South America, and freakishly strong. I used to take yoga with her. We did aerials and poles together. Excuse me. She also was nearing 60, but you'd never guess it. She's so fit and tiny, almost ageless in this intense, wiry, even vibrant way. But I've never quite known what to make of her. I wouldn't say that we were close, though for a little while we started to get closer because we were around each other a lot, and the thing is, she started subtly mirroring me, doing her hair like mine, painting her nails the same color, styling herself in ways that felt oddly specific. She even bought me clothes, and it didn't feel like a sweet gesture. It felt off. Like she wasn't admiring me, like she was trying to wear me or be me. And then one day, we were at an open pole together. We were with one other person there, and the studio doesn't have dim lighting. It's actually bright and fluorescent. She was doing a sideways pole sit, and I could feel her watching me. We're both extremely flexible, but I have a connective tissue disorder, so I have a slight edge on her, which isn't a big deal, but she is extremely competitive. Probably even a covert narcissist. Anyway, I'd just done something kind of splitty, and I turned around to smile at her because it felt like she was looking at me, and when I did, her eyes were completely black. I mean, fully black. I looked for several seconds because I couldn't look away, and she seemed vacant. Not checked out, but absent, like she'd gone somewhere, momentarily, and she was temporarily checked out. But yet it also felt like there was something in her place, like an energetic placeholder. Something else seemed to be looking out through her, but it wasn't necessarily an intelligent being. Well, that's a little bit insulting. I was left with this feeling of, I don't think I was supposed to see that. And I'm pretty sure she doesn't know I saw this. But also, I don't know if she was even aware of something happening. It's like when you accidentally see a mic in a movie or a crew wearing jeans in a film set in ancient Rome. It wasn't just a weird lighting thing. Again, bright fluorescent lights of the studio. Or a blink. It was unmistakable. And I've never seen anything like it before or since. I'm also pretty positive nobody else saw it. Only lasted a few moments, and I finally stopped looking at her and walked over to the table where my stuff was and took a sip, and then everything was back to normal. I know how it sounds. I tried to rationalize it, gaslight myself into letting it go, but I just can't. Not with everything else. The mirroring, the vibe, the way I never felt entirely at ease around her. I'd really love to hear what other people might think of it, because I honestly don't know if I'm reading too much into it myself or not enough. The Shaker, a chronic event from my childhood. I would like to start by saying that this is something that happened to me multiple times in my childhood into my late teens, mid-90s to late 2000s, and only while I lived in my first home. I would also like to note that I will provide alternative explanations for what I experienced at the end of the post, and that I myself am not entirely sure what to believe was actually occurring. The basic structure of the event was always the same. I'd be lying in bed, either before falling asleep or after waking in the middle of the night, and I would experience an onset of dread or something was approaching. There would be no sound or visual indication of anything actually approaching, just a rising alertness and discomfort on my part. I would freeze up even holding my breath when this happened. Then, after a few moments of anticipation, I would have the sensation that my bed had been shaken, either side to side or back and forth. It was never enough to throw me from the bed, but I would wobble in the bed and hear the frame creak or bump in the wall when it would happen. Then after just a second or two, it would stop and the feeling of anxiety would pass. This happened a few times a year, from as early in my childhood as I can remember, until late into high school. Sometimes it would happen 2 or 3 times in a season. Sometimes it wouldn't happen for like half a year. It only stopped happening when we moved out of the house I grew up in the year I left for college. As I was a young child when it started, I developed a sort of myth about the event. I had a superstitious ritual that I developed associated with it. The first aspect of this was in recognizing that I always knew a few seconds beforehand that it was coming. And as I mentioned, my response was to freeze up and hold my breath for a moment. I felt the specific rise in anxiety that signaled it was about to happen. The feeling of anxiety I had around this thing was unique to it. I could tell it apart from the anxiety I had from life stress or from having seen a scary movie or even hearing a sound outside my window. I had this idea in my head that if I stayed still and didn't make any noise, the bed would shake, and that would be the end of it. But that if I ever did anything else, something worse might happen. Never tested the idea. The second aspect of this belief was that something was doing it, something I couldn't see or couldn't hear. I didn't have a name for it, so I began thinking it was as the shaker, since that was the only thing I ever really did, or it ever really did, was just shake my bed. I didn't say the name out loud or talk about it, as I had sort of a speak of the devil attitude that acknowledging it verbally would bring it around. I know this isn't very exciting as far as weird things happening goes, but I've only shared it with a few people since, and it's just nice to just kind of tell and void about it. And before I leave off, a few potential explanations of what I was experiencing. One, I had told a doctor about it, and they had suggested that I was experiencing a small burst of adrenaline. You know how sometimes when you're tired and you kind of jolt awake and how you can have this physical jerk of your body? It's often caused by a small release of adrenaline. Of the few explanations I have, this seems the most likely, though it doesn't seem to account for the fact that I sensed it coming or that it hasn't happened since I moved from my first house. Although I could have quote-unquote aged out of that response, I suppose. Number 2 is my bedroom was on the second story for most of my life. It was the quote-unquote bonus room, a room built above the garage of the house. Maybe the experience could be caused by something structural in my room, like a minor floor settlement or a small earthquake or an HVAC unit kicking on or something. This does seem unlikely to me, as I didn't associate the event with the sound of the HVAC kicking on, or a sound that I know well in that house, or with any sounds of the floor settling. Also, earthquakes is a huge stretch. There'd be a lot of minor earthquakes with no one really seeming to notice. Anyway, that's the gist of it. Hope some of you at least find it mildly interesting. Trying to figure out what we encountered in 2017. For background, this happened in the UK in 2017, and it was in the winter. There was 4 people, including me, my cousin, and 2 mates from school, riding bikes along the area that we're from. There is a long bike path that used to be Victoria tracks that run from the south of our city to the east. We were riding the bikes along the path, as mentioned. We were approaching a part of the path that had a bridge overlooking the main road in our area. The path isn't really illuminated very well, just simple street lights, but part of the path overlooking the road is illuminated by the cars. We seen a figure which was black looking over the bridge. It stopped and turned to us. It was not like a black person, but pitch black. Maybe 5'9", no facial features, and it was just a solid black person. Me and the others stopped around 10 feet away from it. It wasn't illuminated by passing cars underneath or anything. It stopped, it looked at us, got on top of the bridge, and jumped. We cycled to where it jumped off, and nothing was below it. Me and the other lad cycled off. I lost contact with the two lads, but my cousin remembered it too. We were 14, maybe 15. We weren't under the influence of anything, and asking other people and looking online, it seemed to be a shadow person. The thing that still gets me is the fact it turned to us and jumped off, just wondering if anybody had any answers to what it was and why it did what it did. Could this be paranormal? I don't believe in the paranormal, but some weird stuff is happening in our 200-year-old house. So I've never been somebody who jumps to ghosts or spirits as an explanation for things. I like facts, but lately I'm running out of them. I live in a house that's over 200 years old. It's old, sure, and every now and then something odd might happen, but nothing too weird or consistent until recently. First, me and my partner both heard a phone ringing in the house. It was loud and clear, but it wasn't either of ours, and it was a tone we'd never heard before, just this strange, unfamiliar ring echoing from nowhere. Then we started hearing what sounds exactly like phone vibrations at night. You know that buzzing noise when you get a notification? Just that. No notifications, no phones lighting up. It's like a ghost phone is blowing up in the room. But now it's gotten even weirder. At night we keep hearing the sound of two glass bottles clinking together as if somebody's gently tapping them. Happens randomly and we can't trace it to anything. And to top it off, my partner swears she's heard me call her name clearly when I've been downstairs fast asleep. I still don't believe in the paranormal, at least not yet. But I'd be lying if I said this wasn't making me question things. New apartment doubt. I currently moved into a new apartment facing a bunch of trees. Not necessarily woods, but as close as woods come in the city. I never noticed anything at first until my boyfriend came home asking me if I left a room light on in the new apartment. We're in the middle of moving, so we still sleep at the old apartment. I told him I probably did, considering it was my sister's room and I might have walked out without realizing. Granted, I was alone there for a few hours and nothing weird happened. We brushed it off and my boyfriend texted me last night saying, "I have to tell you something about that apartment. There's something weird unless you guys are pranking me." I honestly didn't even think anything about it until I got home and mentioned it to my sister. She tells me, "Oh, he must be talking about all the cabinets being opened." "What do you mean?" I asked her. "Oh, well, when you went to the apartment before him, all the cabinets and drawers were open. I figured it was you and you were moving everything in." I was surprised, considering I'm pretty OCD when it comes to leaving things open. "Really? You think I left it open? When do I ever leave things open when cleaning?" After this, my boyfriend told me the same thing happened to him when he walked in. My sister's room light was on, doors all the way open, and every door and cabinet was open. I think they're pranking me. I check their phones for texts or calls to signify that they're all in together on this thing and just want to spook me. And we all end up going to the apartment together. There's 4 of us. I walk in first, doubting that they'll ever have time to open anything before I go in, and every single cabinet and door is open. Dishwasher wide open. Sister's room light is on again. Now we all think the other person is messing with us and vice versa. I think it may be a spirit, but I'm not sure. When we're there, nothing happens, but it's always when we leave. I told everybody not to go in without each other, just to prove it's not one of us. I'm hoping to get a camera set up this coming Friday. What do you guys think?